By Josh Sexton, by Alison McGovern, by Cam Rimmer to talk about, well, lots of things, lots of things. Some weeks, Josh, I'm not going to lie to you, sometimes I am talking to John and I'm a bit like, what are we going to talk about for part one of TAW Live? TAW Live this week, though, Josh, it very much follows the formula of popular Anfield Wrap video, 10 topics, 10 minutes, and that there's so much to get through. There are so many topics, and how many minutes are there?
Not as well, more than 10. That's the good thing. There is more than 10 minutes to get through all of the topics, but it feels like this is what happens with Liverpool, isn't it? It's like you're waiting for something to happen. Sometimes there's a bit of a barren spell, but then suddenly you get attacked by at least 10 things happening at once, and it feels like the world is going to end.
The world is indeed going to end. There's no shadow of a doubt on that one. But when is the question, not to be answered on this show, because we've got other things to do instead. We've got final thoughts on Liverpool 2, Real Madrid 5. We've got the Spirit of Shankly UEFA joint statement post-report. We're going to have a little bit of a chat about John Motson sadly passing away. There's the white paper on football governance that was released yesterday, albeit late. And whatever mad thing he said in his press conference all the way through. That is everything that you've got on part one. We will start off with the final thoughts, though, Cam, on Liverpool 2, Real Madrid 5. Ultimately, where I've grown annoyed in the days watching certain goals back and so on and so forth is Liverpool's passing acquaintance with match scenarios. 3-2, they panic. I don't know why they panic at 3-2. There's still 3 halves of football to play to all intents and purposes. They concede a goal that's a 3-on-1 at 5-2. When there is still 2 hours of football to play to all intents and purposes. I'm just surprised, to be honest with you, but I think it's sort of been the case all season that Liverpool have had a really rocky relationship with the scoreboard and the clock.
Yeah, I mean, I felt it when they got the first back, to be honest. It was kind of a case of you just knew what was going to happen eventually. And let's be honest, like, it's Real Madrid. They're unbelievable. I still don't think they get the credit. Like how many Champions Leagues they've won in recent times, they don't get the credit for it, and they don't get the credit now. Doing an unbelievable side, but yeah, like you said, it's just I think it was you said on the review where Real play games. They know how long's left of the game. With us, it was kind of let's get a one now. Come on, let's get as many goals as possible. Whereas they were like, no, it's sound. Let's just go with it. And as each goal went in, you could just see the confidence going. You could see the nerves going with the fans. It was when we went 2-0 up, it was like Anfields of old, wasn't it? Where everyone was fully behind them, and then as soon as you get the one goal, it was just, and as every goal went past, it just got worse and worse. But yeah, that's something I think for us to be able to get back to the top table again, we really need to manage and not the games, but it's just these little 20, 30 minutes.
He talks today, Alison, in his press conference about emotion, and he talks a lot about emotion. He tends to talk about emotion positively, but he goes out of his way today to say in his press conference that emotion is important, but emotion isn't everything. And it felt like for Liverpool, that game against Real Madrid, and maybe a few games over the course of this season, I'm even thinking of games where Liverpool end up getting a bit of a result. Emotion has become such a driving force. This isn't a team that currently lives on its emotions. But firstly, that's exhausting. And secondly, you need more than just emotions in order to live and function.
Yeah, exactly. It's I think that's what it was. I think that's what the first 15-20 was. It was riding on. To be fair, that's where it was. It was just going on that, and then you could see the exhaust, like how exhausted they were when they got to 2-0. It was like, right, what do we do now?
And it's interesting, Alison, that he mentions that in his press conference.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that his comments about confidence were really, really instructive. That you can't train for confidence. It's just something that happens. And he makes this analogy of like, you can be a great driver for 30 odd years and then you scrape the car and then you're like driving really nervously and there's literally nothing you can do because it's occurred to you that you can scrape the car because you have, even though you're a really experienced driver. And then you kind of go with it. And after a while, you realize that probably you were just unlucky and it's not you. And I think that's the emotion at play, really, that we've been through quite the season. And, I do think that there's lots of reasons that are not footballing reasons for the kind of overburden of emotion in Liverpool Football Club at the moment. And you can't train it out of them, but you just have to go through a process of dealing with those emotions and let that confidence come back over time. We've had this period where we just couldn't keep the ball out of the net for the first 20 minutes. And we've kind of come through that. And there will just be these like frustrating times where that flood of emotion really undermines their like strategy and planning, because it's that feeling of lack of control means that you just kind of like lose your head, and that the game plan then goes out the window.
He was very calm post-match, and he mentions that today in his press conference, Josh, that he was calm post-match. And he makes clear today in his press conference he was calm with the players. You get the impression he that was legitimate, that the calm he was showing in his press conferences post-match was part of that as well. And I do sort of wonder if he's watching this unfold before his eyes, and something in him goes, I need to be the calm one now. In the past, you've got the impression he's wanted to be the emotional one. You've seen him geeing the crowd up. You've seen him be a certain way with his players post-match and in certain moments. And I just wonder if maybe it was just literally whilst he's watching that Real Madrid game, he just begins to think to himself, maybe this is all being a bit too keyed up for a period of time. Maybe I now need to be the calm one, and maybe that's what we're going to see from him from now for the rest of the campaign.
Yeah, well, he says it a few times today. He almost sort of plants that seed of, I saw bits of this coming, and I think that would have been, a little bit what happened after Real Madrid as well. He obviously says in no uncertain terms today, and all of us accept that, conceding 5 goals in any home game, in a home Champions League game, if it feels like especially, to do it on that stage, it is terrible for Liverpool. Liverpool don't have a history of doing that, and they don't want to be building up a history of doing that. So I think he accepts that, but he also accepts that the challenge was going to be difficult. He says it's the reason that he signed the new contract was because he didn't want to just sort of burden another manager with this. And I almost think back to, it's before my time, but the way that people talk about it, the team that Kenny Dalglish hands over to Graham Souness in the early 90s. And, it wasn't Kenny's intention to do that, but Graham Souness had a massive task to rebuild that team on his hands. And Klopp clearly thinks that, the manager who would have come after him if he'd have left when he was originally scheduled to would have had the same. And people may have been saying in the same way, I imagine people back then would have said, can we have Kenny back? Would have been going, can we just get Klopp back and this will all be sorted? And he alludes to that himself. So it's not to say that, Klopp's got all the answers to all these questions, because I think his press conferences this season prove that he doesn't, and he's getting quite frustrated that sometimes the journalists expect him to have all the answers to these questions. But he's seen a few of these things coming in the post. He acknowledges that it's going to be difficult. He acknowledges that Real Madrid, as Cam says, are a very, very good football team who literally thrive on games of football like we saw on Tuesday night, and sometimes them's the breaks.
Them's the breaks. I think he doesn't want to get himself too sort of, complacen's the wrong word, Alison, but he doesn't want to come over too relaxed, too calm about them being the breaks. And I think he's trying not to today when he's speaking about it.
Yeah, you can't shrug it off and be like, well, you know what, this happens in football. Like, we play so many games. If you think that watching a sport where this never happened would be as fun as the sport we watch is, then you're a fool. Like, he can't say that, like, this happens, but that is the truth. I think that his calmness is kind of the only approach. And I think Josh's analysis of like the transition plan and the kind of thinking about the succession is the right one. He alludes in the press conference to like the kind of club that Liverpool is. And I think he's got a sense of that being different and not wanting to get into that mad roundabout of a great manager leaving, replacement not having great circumstances, probably being a good manager, but not having great circumstances. And then because they followed somebody who did, whatever way you look at it, Klopp's delivered a level of success, certainly in relation to the Premier League title, that's unique, not able to deliver anything like that, their unique predecessor. And then you get into a kind of circle downwards as people lose confidence in any manager and they get replaced in quick succession. We've got plenty of examples in the Premier League of that exact pattern. So it makes complete sense to me that Jurgen would seek to avoid that and that the club would seek to avoid that. The question is, can we make progress over the games we have got to come so that we can just work through this? Because it's no doubt in my mind that some of our newer, younger players are incredible talent, but they need to quickly make progress on some of the management issues, some of the game management issues that will give them that experience and confidence.
Cam, the other thing that comes out of Tuesday as a day is the ground making clear its contempt towards UEFA, but the flip side being the British Shankly and UEFA joint statement post the report in the independent report into what happened to Paris in the Champions League final. the idea that the recommendations are going to be followed, and obviously these statements come a little slow. You know, people in the ground didn't even know that the meetings had taken place at that point. I suspect language around statements hadn't been agreed. It must have been no fun whatsoever to be the kids doing the thing with the thing in the middle as the anthem was being roundly booed. But the idea that the recommendations are going to have been accepted by UEFA are moving forward from there. It is progress. It'll be slow progress, although UEFA are saying they're going to act faster than the 8th of May on some of these. And obviously there is a final in Istanbul coming up, even though Liverpool almost certainly now won't be in it. It is good to see. It's good to see that the process has been followed and that Liverpool remain very, very well represented in these conversations.
Yeah, it is, and it's important that we are because, you know, without going into Paris in detail, like it could have been a lot worse. And it does need to get sorted, to be honest. I don't think, like, you know, the statement did come out, but just like, you know, how it came out, it was like, you know, the day after the game, it just all seems, as you said, like it's finally come, but it's like, well, this should have been sorted months ago, sort of thing. It shouldn't take this long to UEFA to have to come out and say that their main football and spectacle was essentially nearly a write-off, to be honest. And hopefully they do end up coming out and saying the right stuff and implementing the right stuff before the next final in Istanbul. But yeah, I mean, going back to the stuff like, you know, the kids holding the banner, like I normally love the Champions League music around Anfield, but now it'll just get drowned out all the time, won't it? And like the boos and stuff. And it's you know, it's a shame how it happens because, you know, our relationship in general with the Champions League is, it's always like the magical nights we've had, but it's always going to be like a us versus them now, and it's all boiled down to.
It was a shame. It was a shame simultaneously, Cam, there was the kerfuffle around the banners being removed. You know, that felt as though it just knocked people a bit asunder. And again, this statement's in the background, this stuff's in the background, but the banners get themselves removed.
Yeah, and you know, I'm not saying I'm a spokesperson for anyone, but at the end of the day, how they were people having the banners up, that was against UEFA, that was nothing against Liverpool or, you know, Real Madrid or anything like that. It wasn't trying to antagonise Real. That was against, you know, against UEFA. And at this, it's gone from like we were all like one collective unit right after Paris. Everyone's saying, right, you know, any help you need, sort of thing. And then it comes to that. It was just all a big mess, if I'm being brutally honest. And hopefully this rectifies it
and moves it along. Josh, the final part of this is going to be seeing those recommendations come on. They're meant to be on the UEFA website. That's part of the process. That's been put into the first recommendation in the report. We talked about it a lot last week and how important that one was. This stuff can't be happening in silence. I think one of the things Liverpool now need, not least because I'll say it again, it's highly unlikely our continuation in this competition this season is likely at this point. Liverpool need other clubs, I think, to also be part of putting pressure on UEFA, sponsors to be putting pressure on UEFA. The idea that BT apologise on the night of the game suggests that broadcasters are also going to be putting pressure on UEFA in order to say, listen, we can't be privy to this stuff. It's got to be better than that.
Yeah, and I think organisations are feeling some of that pressure as well. You know, you mentioned the other week, and you were right to mention that Liverpool have been great, really, in their communications outwardly about everything that's happened in the aftermath of Paris. We've obviously seen the videos of Billy Hogan sort of addressing fans and keeping fans updated on the internal process of what the club have been going through with UEFA. And it would have been nice, you know, as Cam sort of alludes to there, to hear UEFA have been doing more of that sort of thing along the way as well, rather than burying their head in the sand. And, you know, the way the original independent report was released a couple of hours before the derby, the way the apology for this one comes out just a day after the game. But, you know, it's clear now that the pressure is there, that there is some sort of forward momentum. There's obviously been forward momentum from certain sort of groups of people, whether it's the fans, whether it's the journalists who were out in Paris covering the game. It's been clear that from that moment there is that sort of forward momentum and pressure that needs to be put on. But you know, that was just the start, and this bit we've reached now with UEFA apologising, even though it's been one of the things that people have been asking for along the way, by no means means this is the end of the process. There's still going to be so much more to come from this, and it would be nice if, you know, particularly the governing bodies, because they are always the ones who are always asking for more communication from around these sorts of things, the football authorities. It would be nice to hear a little bit more of that outward communication from them. It's
a football family notion, Alison, that I think is quite sort of easily conjured, but actually in practice you don't see that much of clubs coming together on any matters. We're going to come on and talk about the white paper in a second or two, and my God, can the Premier League 14 all fight each other's corner? But there is a wider question, I think, at times here. You know, the other sides who will have fans at European final. We know what happened to Rangers supporters, for instance, at their final as well last season. You know, there needs to be, I think, a concerted effort that's now wider than just Liverpool in order to hold UEFA to account and see the process and the progress that has been made, see it through to the end.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, we could spend the next 3 hours talking about culture change at UEFA and how that could possibly take place and sort of long-standing problems. But when you've got fans of any team not feeling safe, that is such a significant failure that I think that UEFA have got to hear it from all quarters, understand it from all quarters, and be seen to act. And you know, there are issues as well about country governments, you know, and national governments about policing and other things. But the report is so clear on the failings of UEFA. I think it would be irrational on their part not to want to be seen to act and to respond to people. I think what can make that happen is a real clarity of what the response is. So start with this report and make it clear what actions have been taken in response to it, and go from there. Not that they're asking for my advice, but that is it if they were.
All right, we'll move on to our next thing because there is so much to go through one at a time. Alison, it'll be you and I leading on this to start with because unfortunately Cam and Josh are remarkably and sickeningly young. John Motson passing away. It's one of those things where you don't want to fall into nostalgic nonsense, but it occurred to me first and foremost a number of John Motson's commentaries that I can sort of just conjure in my head around Liverpool goals, that I remember the words as much as I remember the goals through there. And it's part of football's previous era, having this strange combination of rarity on the one hand, that sort of leads to on the other these moments when they are soundtracked become cherished. You know, it's VHS football compilations of things like Team of the Decade, because there wasn't football.
Rock and goal years. Do you remember that?
The rock and goal years. All of these things are the things that, therefore, you know, because
before there was YouTube, when you used to relive great moments in football matches on a TV program that would be on at, like, you know, at some point on a Saturday morning or on a Sunday afternoon when there was nothing else, and they'd have these incredible compilations of great goals clipped with stirring words and like banging tunes. And I think John Motson will forever be that incredible broadcaster who brought those moments to life. I think more and more these days, and I'm just going to wallow in nostalgia. More and more these days, you're expected to have been a top flight footballer. Yeah, somebody just put in the chat, the Culture Club versus the Crazy Gang. It's a classic. So you're expected to have been a top flight footballer. But the thing about top flight footballers is there's nothing about that is necessarily going to give you the skill of a broadcaster. And John Motson's era was about the skill of the commentator and the broadcaster. And, you know, I heard Clive Tilsley talking about him. And, you know, there's another one, somebody whose knack to say what they see and to capture it for millions of people is just kind of magical in the moment. And I think, yeah, for those of us who grew up pre-YouTube and you know, this era where it more tends to be footballers who are on the kind of co-commentary or who are leading, the likes of John Motson is just absolutely irreplaceable. And I do think that he is literally irreplaceable. I think he's the master of that art.
There's something for me, Josh, in now. It occurred to me when for instance, you watch any game, with the exception genuinely of finals, any game, part of it becomes trying to sell the next game. So, you know, even if you're watching Liverpool 2, Real Madrid 5, they are telling you about what else is going to come up on BT Sport. They know that there's another game just around the corner. They know there's another game on another channel at that time. Whereas, again, and I'm not saying that, listen, the world's a different place, and I'm not saying that, far from it, I'm not saying that rarity is better. But I think what that meant was that the commentary used to be much more in the moment. I am in this game. This is the only game that sort of matters for now. I haven't got to worry about selling another list of games. I haven't got to put this in a wider context that often beyond, it's a fourth round FA Cup game or anything like that. And that's one of the things that's why it also leads to these odd senses, I think, at times, like tenses, that I know I do it in my writing, and you almost certainly have to edit it an awful lot, where we're in and out of different tenses, because that's the way in which Motson spoke, Tildesley on Radio City spoke, Barry Davis even, who was quite erudite, he'd move between these tenses, because it was about capturing the moments, and sometimes it was about what just happened, what was going to happen, what was happening, but it was all in together. And I think that idea of this is where we are now, this is the moment we're in, this is the football match we're in, has been lost a teeny little bit by the fact that football comes as an avalanche that never stops.
Yeah, and I don't know if it sounds sort of pretentious to say, but I think there's almost an empathy factor with it, as well as an empathy with the audience, and wanting to describe that moment and sum up that moment to an audience, and that sort of comes through to me whenever I hear Clive Tildesley speak in particular, because he sort of goes deeper on almost commentary theory now these days, which he's very, very good at. And when he talks about it, the thing he talks about first and foremost is the audience, and that was something that I think classic commentators like John Motson will be a sort of classic commentator now. It's what commentators like him sort of built their whole careers on was that idea of doing this for an audience. It's not the Mitchell and Webb look thing of football. It's here, it's there, it's another game of football. It's QPR versus West Brom and that kind of thing. It's just being in that moment and knowing that there's so many people who are hanging on that moment, but also hanging on your every word, because you are the person who is providing colour to it. And there's different mediums of that, of course, because there's live watch-alongs now, there's radio, there's football, there's the TV football. Sorry, so there's
don't pull the whole house of cards down around us, Josh.
There's different mediums of consuming football these days. Whereas it was so much purer in those times, because I think people knew where they were watching games of football, and it was always in that one moment. And that's what these commentators were so good at, is establishing that with the audience.
Josh, do not fall into the past was better trap. However, however, there was something about how exciting it was to hear John Motson's voice in a big game. That empathy point that you just mentioned, Josh, he understood how it felt to watch a big game of football. And he was able, just by his words, to know that you were feeling that, and to put words to it in a way that made it even more exciting. Just the sound of his voice got you in the zone. And that's why I think so many people, particularly Neil of our generation and older, so many people, he is the defining football commentator.
Just last little thing on a Cam, as part of this, everything becomes the wider conversation. What's going to happen next? And that it struck me that off the back of Tuesday night, there was nothing that happened on Tuesday night that changed my view really on what happens next with Liverpool. Maybe a little bit around whether or not there needs to be a pathway for Trent Alexander-Arnold to be able to play games, but maybe not always at right back. But what was striking was there was a desire to turn it into a massive moment that needed all this conversation. I'm of the view we pretty much need to buy 3 really good midfielders. I was of the view of that before a ball was kicked. I'm of the view of it afterwards, and so on and so forth. But that's what I mean when I say, that's something that I think has changed, that everything in football needs to lead to the next conversation, needs to lead to the next story, needs to do all those little bits and pieces. And the comment there from Les has just come up on screen about modern commentators talking too much. And I think they're almost involving themselves, not so much in talking too much about the game that's in front of them, but ending up talking too much with wider discourse and sort of saying, well, this is part, and almost trying to lead a chat that's separate to the thing that we're watching. But then I think that's what people are doing more of in football in general. People are determined to, it happens to me all the time when I'm writing and talking post-match, people are determined to, for instance, talk about what they view as the bigger picture rather than the football match that we're either watching or have just watched or are just writing about. And I find that quite difficult at times because I'm in the football match. I want the football match, but it does feel as though everyone wants the bigger picture.
Yeah, and I think that's just the way of the world, though, isn't it? It's just, there's just so much going on everywhere. And I think saying that point about, advertising other games while you're watching a big game, you don't realise how many times these other games do get advertised. Normally it'd be once a half. It's 2-3 times now each half, and it's crazy. But going back to John Motson and your Clive Tildesley's, it's them commentators who have got the gift of where you remember what they say before the goal sometimes. So you can remember lines of goals, I LFC TV back in the day when I'd be like, Whelan's curled one, I think that's against, is it United won the cup finals? I remember you can hear,
Whelan's curled one, yeah.
Yeah, I can hear John Watson saying that prior to Ash then. What game was that? You remember the words. It's crazy, isn't it? It's the gift of it. But yeah, it's a brilliant commentator. He was only just towards like, he'd be on Match of the Day when I was growing up watching this, so didn't really get him as much. But yeah, brilliant commentator. But yeah, I agree with everything that everyone said, to be honest, about commentary nowadays.
All right, next thing is the white paper on football governance that I still haven't had time to read. I apologise to all parties on that.
Weeks of things, aren't they, Neil?
Furious, genuinely furious. I wasn't available yesterday morning when I had time and a plan to have time and couldn't find it anywhere. The first thing about what I have read around it and what to expect around it, and going all the way back to the Crouch Review itself, Alison, is in a similar way to an extent in terms of what's just been discussed. The framing of the conversation around this is, in the first place, very top six focused, then secondly, very Premier League focused. But the most important thing for this white paper and things around this white paper is about 92 clubs, not about 6, not about 20. And I think that's the bit that gets lost, I think, in a lot of the wider immediate discussion that comes from football journalists. They lose the idea of the other 72 clubs all the time in this, in order to focus on the top 6, or even at times to focus on the 2 clubs that are, to all intents and purposes, state-owned.
I think that's true. That's even before you think about anyone else. The white paper itself and the Crouch Review before it sets out a structure that sees football clubs having more financial stability in the future, which starts from the premise that football clubs are not businesses like any other. So they shouldn't be facing the same risk from just going under through bad management that any normal company like Frank, we can just live with. The premise is that's not true of football clubs. And so the white paper sets out financial stability recommendations, and they apply to, football clubs 91 and 92 as they do 1 and 2 in exactly the same way, commensurate with like the size of the club and so on and so forth. So I think the first thing that people should know is like that this is about financial stability and getting some of the practices that have grown up in football that have seen clubs go under, making them less likely to happen. Like in anything, you can't get rid of the risk of, reckless behavior completely. But my goodness, we can do a lot to make it less likely that clubs end up collapsing and devastating thousands of fans through bad management. So that's what's at the heart of it. I get that they'll be like, well, what does this mean for Man United, or like, what does this mean? But like, I get that that's where the kind of speculation will be, but the whole idea is to put that financial stability model at the center of it, along with other stuff that's really important around, culture and heritage, and making sure that grounds can't be, put in a really risky position against the interests, the long-term interests of the club. We've got a long way to go yet, and there'll be a lot of reaction and comment on the white paper, but I think this is a major step forward, because from the independent review that Tracy led, like the next big step was to get a kind of comprehensive plan for from the government, and now to move that forward into legislation, and we take it from there basically.
Just I'll come back to you on this aspect quickly, Alison, for people listening. Statutory regulation is in conjunction with competition-based regulation, and it's not meant to be in opposition to it or in place of it. And I make that point regardless of some of the spin that's been seen from the Premier League in the immediate aftermath.
And you mean competition as in the football competition, not the market competition?
Yes, I mean the football competition. And I think that there's been this desire to frame, firstly, as though either government action's got to solve every problem in football, or it's been a waste of time. It's more the idea that it can't, and that's the point. It can't. It's still down to these competitions to be able to run themselves properly and run themselves well. It's just that certain key principles would be backed up by the power of a regulator that is backed by the state.
Yeah, and like, look, in an ideal world, the regulator doesn't need to intervene at all. Basically it sets up a licensing system that then puts requirements on people who who own and run football clubs. We've already got some of that, the fit and proper persons test and so on, that doesn't really work, but could be, will hopefully work better under the new system. Like the hopefully, the vast majority of clubs will look at this and think, well, it is not in our interests to have our competitors, act in a financially irresponsible way. So therefore, we should all embrace this and, comply and make sure that all of the books and the finances are in order. And therefore, the job of the regulator is minimal. But we've seen too many instances where that hasn't been the case. And that is the driving force behind this on the financial side. As you say, on the myriad other footballing issues, there'll still be plenty for the people running competitions and for others to say and for us to speculate and chat about as supporters. But this is really about the guts of a football club. It's about the money and making sure that football clubs don't just disappear overnight because of reckless behaviour.
It's important to, as part of this, to therefore not hide behind it where other football matters are concerned. General football reform chat, I always find it takes, and this regulator will hopefully to some degree end that argument. It takes a protectionist rather than a progressive view, rather than a view that considers changing football for the better and is aware of what's at stake. The conversation I am having in my mind and occasionally elsewhere at the moment is that, for instance, it would be exceptionally naive not to be aware of how important on a economic, civic, opportunity-based level, for instance, football is to the city of Liverpool. And, we should be able to find ways to encourage and to grow those opportunities, grow those opportunities for jobs for young people, grow those opportunities and everything that goes around football. And again, that isn't solved by a regulator. That's solved by people trying to work out a way in which to make football work better and work as much as it can for every single community in a different way. And I think that's still got to be at the core of all of our football-based conversations.
Yeah, definitely. It's got to be, literally like what you said, to be honest. You've got to make sure that this doesn't end up, obviously, the intentions are there, like what they want to sort out, it's great, but you do need the people who are the experts in a way to be able to come in and find a way for us as football clubs to be able to go on, because you can get all these things regulated, you can say this and that, but at the end of the day, it's a day-to-day business that's being run by people, and it's got the best interest of the communities. Like you said, you've got to make sure that once it gets regulated, that there's stuff past it, that there's a plan past all of this, because you can say all you want by saying, oh yeah, we don't have this Super League, we don't have this, we don't want clubs to disappear overnight, but the end, it's happened. All of this has happened for a reason. You need to have these contingency plans in, because it's not just about it's not just about a football club. There's much more to it.
There is, Josh, and also every football club's different, and however this regulation works, it's got to work for all 92 current professional clubs. I think that's worth pointing out. Some clubs are very much community vehicles and will be. Some clubs are huge global behemoths. Some clubs at least pay lip service to the idea that they want to be both, and I think Liverpool can fall into that category. And that's where, for me, the thing I sort of keep coming back to is, as an example of something that doesn't get discussed, if LFC TV were able to screen their own games, LFC TV will be employing, I think, a minimum of 150 more people in the city of Liverpool in the visual media business. At the minute, that's not even allowed as a conversation that even starts. It's a given that we mustn't go near that. We mustn't talk about that. But that's what I mean about, the regulator's got to work and then say, right, the rest of it, you've got to go and get on with. You've got to go and work that out. And it's important that football supporters remain part of that conversation. And we don't all just sort of go when the regulator comes in, right, all right, that's that done then. Let the money people cut loose.
Yeah, and it's like you say, it's acknowledging that, every single member of the EFL, of the Premier League, of however far this goes, has got different needs. At sort of the bare minimum, we all believe that our football clubs should be community assets. But then, like you say, there's global powerhouses within that. I've sort of despaired over the last few years at watching what Macclesfield FC, the sort of Phoenix club of Macclesfield Town, have become. And this is no shade on Robbie Savage or anybody who's been running Macclesfield FC, but I feel like it's the new money that's come into that club as someone who watched them as a kid has sort of taken it away from being that community asset. And I literally follow a football club where I think that Liverpool is also a global powerhouse, but there is so much that is still rooted in the community of Liverpool, and I think that's really important. And that's where, you know, Alison says before about not getting too sort of caught up on nostalgia and not believing that the past is better than now. But we've allowed ourselves, or football has been allowed to get into this position where all the regulations that have, you know, most of them have probably been in place for tens and tens of years in football, have no longer got any teeth. There's you know, ancient sort of regulations and things all around the game which now don't serve any purpose. You know, Alison mentions the fit and proper persons test for owners, obviously FFP, which, you know, is part of the reason FSG believe their model could work at Liverpool's, because they expected FFP to have teeth. So there's so far to go in this, and you put in your agenda that, you know, that again, this is just the, you know, the beginning of something that is going to go on for years and years and decades, and probably outlast us all. But that's what it needs to do, and it needs to acknowledge the needs of so many different groups of people, so many different communities, and so many different types of football clubs.
There we are then. That'll do us for that. I think we pretty much got through everything. Anyone want to talk about anything he said in his press conference? He seemed in a good mood, Alison. I was enjoying him massively. I'd have liked more. I'd have requested more. I think he would like less. I mean, I think he manages to maintain his mood despite the fact that he's increasingly bored of the people in front of him. But I felt like he was in great shape.
So you do sometimes think, when he sort of like takes a breath before he answers the question, what he's actually thinking is, why have they asked me that? Like,
Josh watches this every week, and Josh rates them now. He could do match ratings afterwards of what he thinks of the individuals.
10 out of 10 today.
And like, you know, journalists have got to ask questions. That's their job. But like sometimes, you know, they ask questions to which there literally is no answer. And then when Klopp says, like, words to the effect of like, there's literally no answer to the question that you've just asked, they sort of like ask it again in a slightly different way. So
or he refuses to be drawn on this. That's the headline.
Yeah.
Refuses to be drawn.
I love it's them faces he does sometimes when he's listening. He's not like looking at. He's looking away, just thinking what's coming. It like he just knows what's coming. But yeah, exactly. You two have just nailed it there, by the way. So there we go.
Yeah. So good for you, Jurgen, for like communicating to all of us, you know, your actual feelings about the situation. But I'm
enjoying the mug as a prop as well. I feel like the mug is increasingly becoming a prop. The size of it as well, it's bigger than his head. It's like a house.
I think that he's got such perspective. I think that he's got such perspective on football. He's able to be emotionally engaged without his perspective being absolutely dominated by his emotions, which is an incredible thing to be able to do as a human. I'm extraordinarily jealous of him that he's able to do that. Not to be able to communicate that he doesn't want Liverpool to be performing the way it is at the moment this season, but that he thinks that he knows where we need to go and what we need to do next. And that will help, but it's not going to be immediate. To be able to communicate all of that and not be kind of driven up the wall with frustration. Amazing. What a fella.
Well, he humanizes everything as well, doesn't he? And it comes back to that word we used before, you know, when we talk about commentators, it's empathy. One of the things that he mentioned in the press conference, which is so simplistic, but I loved it, was that, you know, people want Liverpool to strengthen from a position of strength all the time. You know, when Liverpool went and won the Premier League or the Champions League, people were probably going out and say, I'm sure I was one of them, by the way. In fact, I'm certain I was, saying, go out and sign Kylian Mbappe. And he's saying, well, that's all well and good. But when you've just gone to, you know, the last kick of every single game of every football match last season, funnily enough, lads don't really want to leave the football club when you're in that sort of good a mood. Everybody wants to stick around. And, you know, Jurgen Klopp is such a manager of humans and such a human being himself. But he's like, well, I'm not going to force any of these lads out the door. If they're all loving playing here and they're all getting on and they're all best of friends, I'm not going to split that up. Who am I to split that up?
It's a good job they all hate it now. Make it easier. They're all hating every minute of it. All hating every minute of it. Unless they've got Stockholm syndrome at this point. We're stuck here. If any of the footballers are watching this, first and foremost, the manager would approve. But also, secondly, you know, don't feel as though we're trapping you forever. You can make whatever choices you want to make. Listen, that's the end of part one of TAW Live. We've gone very long indeed, so we'll be quick in part two. But it's been an absolute pleasure. If you listen to this as a podcast, coming up, we've got Sanjay Bandari and Grace Merritt, both of them conveniently speaking to John Gibbons, which increases the brevity of this little bit indeed. So they will be coming now. And we're back. It is part 2 of TAW Live. It is Neil Atkinson with Alison McGovern, with Cam Rimmer, and with Josh Sexton, 3912. If you've got that on your bingo card this week, feel free to contact the nearest steward. You are in luck all the way through. Do scrape it off there on the silver and see how you got on. We will rattle through. It is the game coming up against Crystal Palace. They're in a poor moment, Cam. It's a Saturday night. It'll be a big atmosphere. They've got an eagle. Should we have a trained cormorant?
Yeah. But going back, do you know what? Just your last bit then, I was ready for like a normal question. You just set me off. But with these tomorrow, it's just a case of this is literally the ground where, as the game goes on, these will get more up for it. So but it's also the type of ground, like, look at last season, like, they were up for it, and then we score a couple in the first half, and then just from there, it can just be such a basic football match at Selhurst Park. It's a mad ground to go to, except of course if it's the Monday night in 2014, which is just a totally crazy one-off. But I think tomorrow, like I think I said it before the Wolves game the other week, and look what happened there. But it's literally one of them games tomorrow where just go in, do what we've been doing, like at Newcastle last week. I mean, we got the 2 against Real, but as Klopp was saying today, even though it was all doom and gloom after Real, the signs are there-ish that it's improving. We just need to carry on.
The signs there it's improving, Josh, and I really do feel that. I think the main thing that I've enjoyed is the nature of the goals across the last. You can include the 2 against Real in there as well. All 6 of them have felt like, and the 2 at Newcastle especially, felt worked on. It felt like this is everyone's doing what they're meant to be doing. The flip side is we're coming up against a side who don't have many goals. And, I love Eze. I think he's great, and he's arguably the likeliest scorer they're going to put on the pitch from the outset. Joachim Anderson, I think, is a really, really good player. But the team that kicked off their last league game had only scored 6 league goals. Eze comes off the bench, but it only scored 6 league goals at the moment to kick off. And this is the ultimate in nothing daft Liverpool. Nothing daft Liverpool, and we'll be all right here. The concern is there's been a lot of daft.
Yeah, and there's also been, conceding 3 goals to a Wolves side who I think had only scored 12 in the league before that point. So Liverpool know how to concede goals to sides who don't score many goals. But I want to go back to your point on
what a skill.
Yeah, I want to go back to your point on the goals we've scored, because I think that's important. It's one of the reasons that I like you, Neil. Was I think we literally had the conversation in the office this morning after Real Madrid. I was tearing my hair out at just how big a picture everybody was being, because the manager has been has acknowledged weeks and weeks ago that look, this season is not ideal by any means for any of us. We're still sort of learning things about the new players that have come in. We're trying to get players back. We're trying to sort of get ourselves to some sort of solid footing, and within that you need to acknowledge that there's some sort of green shoots of recovery. But the Newcastle result, which I think had a bit of an overreaction to it in terms of the way that Newcastle came onto Liverpool in the second half. It almost felt then intensified, I think, by Real Madrid, because suddenly people are going back to the way the Leicester game went compared to the Brighton game and saying, it papered over the cracks, and then suddenly all the cracks were shown the next game, whereas there are 2 games that come completely in isolation. And actually, there's loads to sort of like about Liverpool's first 20 against Real Madrid, which is hard to say off the back of what happens in the end, but there's loads to like about Liverpool's entire game against Newcastle. And I just hope, like you say, Liverpool approach this with that same mentality. The thing I want to see Liverpool get back to, which Real Madrid sort of took away from, is being able to shift through the gears on football teams. It's not needing something so deliberate to go right for them in a football match that they go, from this point now we can reset and we can shift our mentality and this is how we get a result. This is our sort of way out from here, almost waiting for a team to give you a way out. I'd like Liverpool to find more of their own ways out of football games, and this will be a very good chance to do that this Saturday.
Alison, this is to develop on Josh's point there. The importance of keeping their nerve is, I think, a massive part of this. They find their nerve against Everton, and I think you do see them actually find it through the game. Yeah. They keep their nerve against Newcastle when it feels like in the aftermath, because Newcastle do play relatively well second half. A lot of people felt as though Liverpool were flimsy. Keeping their nerve, which they failed to do against Real Madrid, and in the maelstrom that was the game against Real Madrid, they've got to get back to that here against Palace. That's my main get back to. It's not getting back to a different type of football or anything like that. Liverpool have just got to keep the nerve for this one against Palace, and if they do, I think they will be all right.
That's right. Break the game down into chunks. Don't concede early. Get to 20 minutes with a clean sheet. Take the second half of the first half steady. then see what happens when goals are scored. Don't overreact either way. Take it steady throughout. It's back to Jurgen's driving analogy. It's like, don't overthink it. Do 10 minutes, then the next 10 minutes, then the next 10 minutes, then the next 10 minutes. And then before you know it, you'll have got through the 90. And I think that they have shown in the Everton game and elsewhere that like there is nothing necessarily determined about this overwhelming emotion that undermines that. So we can take it steady. I think that you're dealing with a team of players who are older and experienced, and younger and completely inexperienced, who perhaps aren't as fast as they once were, and who have got all the speed and pace in the world. So you just need to have those conversations about what is going well here, and how can we build on it? How can we make sure that we are pressing hard enough and then taking control of the game when we're in possession, and just chunk it out. And that's, you can't think beyond what is in front of you in these games. You've just got to take it steady.
Taking it steady, Cam. He mentions vaguely that there's maybe a couple of knocks after the Madrid game. Doesn't go into any specificity. Are you expecting any or many changes from a Liverpool point of view?
No, I mean, to be honest, it's with us nowadays. It's just a case of you just turn up on the day and see who's fit, because you just don't know who's took the knock. Something might have happened today. Something might happen in the hotel tonight. Literally, it's just one of them. It's just one of them. Just one of them.
An accident with the trouser press.
Yeah, it's I mean, God, so much just like happens in the week, and then it like the life just got took out of me. Took out of me. I was that second half. It's just trying to think who's actually going to be fit, but I can't really think of anything. Is there any off the top of the head who?
No, he did.
Gomez goes down the tunnel, doesn't he?
I think Gomez definitely out. Yeah. But then apart from that, no, I think he'll just be trying to play lads back into form as well, which will be most important. He'll be trying to get lads on the pitch who, if you can get them a good performance and then maybe even a goal out of them, it's only going to help us in the long term.
Do you think he'll do anything differently?
I don't think it'll be Jota, to be honest. I think he'll leave the front three as is, because he referenced with Jota and Firmino today that he feels like they're slow in building back to where they need to be, and also the front three is performing really well as a unit at the moment, which I think he'll want to see more of that. I think he'll make a change in midfield, and I think he'll do Matip for Gomez. I think the change in midfield I'd like to see will probably be Keita for Henderson. Keita's had a good few performances at Selhurst Park, so it sort of seems natural to do that. And Henderson puts in quite the shift against Madrid, whether you think he played well or not. He does loads and loads of.
And there's the game against Wolves coming up on Wednesday.
And there's the game against Wolves coming up on Wednesday, so he's going to have to find a way to sort of stagger minutes across those. There's part of me which thinks he might do a Tsimikas diddle. I personally wouldn't like to see a Tsimikas diddle.
No,
but there's every chance of it, I think.
No. I don't have to get involved. I don't have to ring him, but no, we're all right for that. Let's do subs on that one if things feel as good as in that way. Last little thing on it, Cam, is they win the next two, the level on points with Newcastle. Tottenham have got Chelsea on Sunday. The thing about top four is you haven't got to be perfect, and I think that's the thing that we do all need to bear in mind here. To go back to the building of the confidence, the car analogy, the journey that we are now on until the end of the campaign. Realistically, for me, that's almost the most important thing is building it in blocks, finding your confidence, finding your sea legs a little bit again, not thinking that anything's fixed, but then not thinking that anything's finished. And I think that's going to be the trick for this. This is, when I say keep your nerve, I mean it in every minute of the football match, and I mean it in every minute of our lives until the end of May. Yeah,
let's be honest. Last season, in terms of nerves, this should be a walk in the park, if we're all being totally honest. But I think that's a thing. There is going to be other defeats along the way this season. There might even be another. You never know. It could end up like there might be another game where we just ends up. It could be like a Real Madrid sort of thing where it's just like, what the hell's happened there? But there is going to be more wins as well. I think we started picking up points at the right time. I'd said let's see how we are by the time we play Man United at home. And I think this next week now, if we can. I mean, I'd love it where we win every game, but if you can win the next two and then even a point against United because they're flying at the minute, and then go from there maybe. But yeah, everyone's got to play each other. But as you said, it doesn't have to be perfect. You are going to be able to afford. I think the way it's looking, everyone's not even mentioning Brighton and Fulham as well. They're the other two teams who are above us in between 9 and 4th. There's a lot of football. There's a lot of cancelling out to do, and I'm pretty confident myself. I think we're only getting better as the weeks are going on.
Only getting better as the weeks are going on. That's the spirit. Excellent stuff. That's the way in which I feel as well. Even as we move right the way along here. Also, it's getting a bit warmer. You know, the nights are lengthened. Are shortening. It's sunny. It's nice outside the front
Sun's
today.
unreal, isn't it?
Lovely today.
What did he always say? It's getting to the business end of the season when it's light at Anfield, but our only one this season is going to be Wolves on Wednesday when it's a bit lighter, not a European night. So there we go.
There we go. I mean, it's miserable that Cam. You've done so well before then, but that's not. Yeah, that's
done
not
all your hard work.
That's not the spirit.
It could be one of them nights.
It could be one of those famous nights at Anfield. Excellent stuff indeed from Cam, from Ali, from Josh. Thank you very much indeed as well to the bits in the middle of TAW Live this week. Andy Heaton for producing. It's been a pleasure. It really has been so much to get through. Got through absolutely marvellously. Liverpool have got a lot to get through as well. 2 big games coming up back to back. 6 points will be absolutely lovely. See you later.